A recent report has shown that commercial installations of solar have more than doubled over the last 2.5 years. The Commerce Department has released their preliminary findings on their investigation of anti-dumping of solar panels from four Southeastern Asian nations. And the IRS has released guidelines on how to determine prevailing wages for solar installers. I'm Jay Warmke with Blue Rock Station, and this is the news from the solar industry for the week of December 5th. Now, the top story this week really is that CEA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, has announced that commercial solar installations have more than doubled over the last 2 years, and they're expected to double again over the coming 3 years. Now, when we talk about commercial installations, we're talking about installations for industry such as Walmart, Home Depot, those kind of organizations. They tracked about 47,000 different installations. That's enough power in the commercial segment to power about 3.2 million homes in the U.S. Now, many of these are off-site, not necessarily on the building itself, so they may not be as visible as you might think. Many of the top companies are Silicon Valley companies, as you'd expect. The top five really are Meta, which is Facebook, Amazon, number 2, Apple, and Walmart and Microsoft. But many of the companies are also, bread and butter type organizations, that are installing solar just because it is the cheapest option. The U.S. Commerce Department has announced preliminary findings on their investigation of 4 Southeast Asian countries that were dumping solar panels to avoid tariffs that had been imposed on Chinese manufacturing of solar panels. Now, these countries represent a large slice of the panels that are installed in the U.S. In fact, Vietnam, one of the 4, represents a little over 41% of the panels installed in the U.S. Thailand represents 14.5%, Malaysia, a little over 20%, and of course the 4th one, Cambodia, right at about 5.5–6% of all of the panels. In fact, if you add in South Korea, which manufactures about 11.5% of the panels, now we're looking about 93% of all of the panels that are used in the U.S. manufactured in those 5 countries. Now, significantly, a number of panel manufacturers were excluded from these findings. Of course, these include New East Solar, Hanwha Q-Cells, Jinko Solar, and Boviet Solar out of Vietnam. The rest were found to essentially have been guilty of what we expected they were doing, which was move production from China to these other nations to avoid the tariffs. Now, when this investigation began, caused quite a disruption in the marketplace because many types of these tariffs plus penalties could be imposed retroactively. So people just stopped ordering panels from those nations. So the Biden administration stepped in and said, listen, we'll put a 2-year moratorium on these fees and fines so that we can get this all sorted out. As a result, of course, there was a big boost in imports from those nations immediately following that announcement, increased about 59%. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was recently passed, it's anticipated that's going to make this all pretty much a moot point because it does give added incentives if you use U.S. manufactured product. So many of the panel manufacturers and other product manufacturers are moving their manufacturing facility to the United States. The final report from the Commerce Department is expected May 1st of next year. Now, as an example of some of this manufacturing that's moving to the U.S., Enphase has announced that they're going to be creating about 6 manufacturing facilities in the U.S. Now, Enphase is the largest manufacturer of microinverters. And another provision of the Inflation Reduction Act was that companies wishing to take advantage of these incentives must pay prevailing wage to their installers. Well, the IRS has just now announced what that means, what they're going to be looking for. They are giving a period of time before they begin to enforce this. It will not be enforced until January 30th of next year. But the guidelines make common sense. They are essentially you must maintain adequate records to prove that you are paying prevailing wages, that the prevailing wages apply to all workers on the site, not including subcontractors. So everyone on the site must be paid prevailing wages, and that you can obtain these prevailing wages from the government website, SAM or SAM. .gov. Now, prevailing wages vary from site to site, location to location. So it's not quite a simple thing to say what is prevailing wage. But to give you an example of the meaning of this provision, the average installer in the state of Ohio makes, on average, according to salary.com, around $30,000, $30,500 a year. Now, prevailing wage on average across the nation is going to be about $35 an hour for solar installers, according to a study by Berkeley, the University of Berkeley, University of California in Berkeley. And so that would pretty much double the salary of a solar installer in the state. And NREL, the National Renewable Energy Labs, has released their annual cost of solar installation report. And because of many of these supply chain disruptions we've been experiencing, not just in solar, but in the economy in general, the price of solar has gone up between 2 and 12%. Now, of the cost of solar, about 50% of that is product. The rest are soft costs, such as installation, permitting, shipping, profit margins, things of that nature. So supply cost has had a dramatic impact on the price of this solar installation this year anyway. And that's the news from the solar industry. For this week, we'll see you next week.